shut them, seal and tuck them. I need my listening ears ready. All right, let's listen to find out about this fairy tale. Once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen who for many years were very sad because they had no child. At last, a little daughter was born to them, and the king was so happy that he planned a great feast in the palace, to which he would invite all of his friends and relatives. A feast is a big fancy meal. People sometimes have feasts or parties or a celebration when something special happens. Now in this country, there were 13 fairies. 13 fairies. Of course, the king wished to invite all the fairies to the feast, too, so that each might look kindly upon his child and perhaps give the baby some very special fairy gifts. But as the king only had 12 gold plates for the fairies to eat from, it was decided that one fairy had to be left out. How do you think that 13th fairy is going to feel about not being invited to the feast? So think again. How do you think the 13th fairy is going to feel about not being invited to the feast? Think about it. Turn and talk to your partner. And I want you to talk about how you think the 13th fairy is going to feel about not being invited to the feast. How do you think the fairy's going to feel? Okay. Christopher, can you show me your sad face, how you think that fairy would look? Show me the face that you think for not being invited. No? You want to show me your best face? Aww. Why do you think she'll be sad?
Because they don't like her and will be happy. And then
You think they're all going to be unhappy that she wasn't invited? Okay. I heard you say sad. Heard some... How do you think that 13th fairy is going to feel? Yeah, one fairy's going to be sad. Maybe it's a bad fairy. All right, I heard so many good things. Let me pick some sticks to see who wants to share out about how you think that fairy might feel. Addison.
The fairy might feel sad because she's not good to eat with what's it called?
The king and the queen and their daughter.
The king and the queen.
Okay. Faith.
So, the fairy might feel mad because she didn't get invited.
Yeah.
So, she might turn the baby into Sleeping Beauty because.
Oh my goodness! Not yet. That's too far. Seems like someone has heard this familiar story. I want you to keep thinking, because remember we said this story could actually be different from the one you might have known. So let's read to find out. I think you're onto something, Faith. But I want you to show me how your face would look if you were the 13th fairy who didn't get invited. How might your face look if you were the fairy who didn't get invited?
Sad.
Show me your best sad face. All right.
I can't do it. I can't do it.
Let's read, because I see Ezekiel waving it. Do you think this might be a problem, Ezekiel? That the 13th fairy didn't get invited? You do? Yeah, this could be a problem. All right, let's read to see what's going to happen.
Fairies.
The fairies. Let's count the number of fairies we see at the feast. Are you ready? I want you to count with me.
1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The feast was held with how many fairies? 12. What a wonderful celebration it was. As it drew to an end, the fairies came forward to give the child their special gifts. One said to the child, "I'll give you the gift of virtue, so that you may be good." Another said, "I will give you the gift of wisdom, so that you may be wise." Virtue is another word for goodness, and wisdom's another word for making when you make good choices. A third fairy gave the child the gift of beauty. Yes, a fourth gave her riches, and went on with each fairy, giving everything in the world that one could ever wish for. Who might this be?
The 13th
Maybe. 11 of the fairies had given their gifts, and the 12th was just about to speak when suddenly in came the 13th fairy, the one who had been left out. She was very, very angry, just like the faces you showed me. She cried out in a loud, loud voice, "When the princess is 15 years of age, she shall prick herself with a spindle and die."
That's gonna be upset.
Prick. Think of that word, prick. That means to make a small hole or cut something with a pointed, sharp edge. I think y'all were right when y'all said she might be angry. Without another word, the angry fairy left the hall. Everyone was terrified at what she had said. I see Ezekiel waving his wand. Do you think this is going to be a problem? Keep listening. Everyone was terrified, and the 12th fairy came forward and said, "I cannot undo this evil spell, but I can soften it. Here then is my gift to the child. The princess shall not die, but she will fall into a deep, deep sleep for 100 years. I want you to think about what she said. How do you think the 12th fairy is softening the spell? Think about it in a minute. How do you think the 12th fairy is softening the spell? Your brain's thinking. Turn and talk to your partner. How is the 12th fairy softening the spell? How is she softening the spell?
Instead of dying.
So what is the 12th fairy doing to soften the spell? That's where we're going to share out. By sleeping instead of what? Instead of dying, getting killed.
She could try to
She's sleeping, right? So,
but she's gonna vomit after.
So she's softening her, you say, but she's going to fall into a deep sleep. Wow. What are you thinking, Reggie? How is she softening the spell?
like next day, so she doesn't do that.
Yeah, but a lot of years I might vomit after.
Well, yeah, it seems like you know something about you like sleep too long. What do you think, Dave? Well, how do you think she's softening it, though, when it said she softened the spell? What are you thinking? Oh, I hear your friend. Carly, can you join in with us? What were you saying?
The sleeping
Why do you
was
think
for
she's softening?
100,000 100 days
So that seems like a good reason to me to soften it. I would rather sleep a long time, right? All right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what I think.
Instead of dying, we're gonna go to sleep.
I heard some good conversations of people thinking how she might soften the spell. Madeline, would you like to share it? How might she soften the spell?
I was going to ask another question.
What's your question? So you have, let's keep what we think might happen and see how it might be different. Who would like to share out, how do you think that fairy is softening the spell? Noah?
Because they're nice. Because they make him nice.
So tell me what you mean by that, make them nice. How is she softening the spell?
Because they're being nice to them.
How is she being nice? Instead of her, what's happening? Instead of her dying, what is she saying she's going to do?
They come alive.
By doing what, though? Someone,
Magic.
yeah, magic. Who wants to build upon Noah's thinking? What do you think here he's trying to say? Because I think he's onto the right track. Being nice, using their magic. Jacob Moncada?
Sleeping for 100 years.
Yes. Who agrees that would be better than dying just to sleep for 100 years? All right. We're going to find out what happens, hands down. And I notice a lot of people are making connections to things they've heard and seen. So I want you to keep thinking about that and see how it might be different from what you've read. The princess, oh, I'm sorry, I have to come right back here, guys. The king was determined to protect his child. Surely, he said, my daughter cannot prick herself with a spindle if she never sees one. So he gave an order that every spindle in the kingdom should be burned. Why does the king want all the spindles in the kingdom to be burned? Why do you think he wants all of them to be burned? Think about it. Why do you think he wants all of them to be burned? Think. Think. Whisper it to your friend. Whisper it. Why do you think she wants them to do that? Why would he want to burn all the spindles? I know that was a quick whisper, but I think many of you got what they were trying to say. I heard some of you say in this group they got it burned so that she wouldn't die. If there was no spindle to prick her finger, she might not die. So let's read to find out what happens here. The princess grew up, and all the fairies' gifts of the child were plain to see. She was good, wise, kind, beautiful. Everyone who saw her loved her. On the day that she turned 15, the king and the queen were away from the palace. The princess was left all on her own. And she wandered about the palace. It's easy for waving the wand. Looking into all sorts of places, peeking into rooms that she had never explored before. She climbed a narrow, winding staircase that led to a little door with a rusty key sticking out from the lock. She turned the key and opened the door. There sat a little room with an old lady who was spinning a wheel. Spinning away. Think about it. What do you think is going to happen? Think about it. Put your thinking caps on, give it some time to think. What do you think is going to happen now she sees that spinning wheel? Hold it in. Shout it out.
Make a dress!
You think she's going to make a dress?
Yes.
What do you think?
She's gonna make like a bed blanket so she can just go to sleep.
Well, she could, because we did hear that it could be made by yarn. What do you think, Carly?
That she's gonna touch the top and the curves.
Who else thinks that might happen? I thought all the spinning wheels were supposed to be burned. See if what Carly's thinking, her predictions are correct. What do you notice right here on that spinning wheel? What do you notice?
It has like something on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Look,
What did you say, Ezekiel?
same thing as the picture.
Mm-hmm. Let's see what's going to happen. Good day, said the princess, entering the room. What are you doing? She asked. She had never seen a spinning wheel before. Why do you think the princess had not seen a spinning wheel before? Why would the princess have never seen a spinning wheel before?
I'll think
Reggie?
Maybe because maybe because all of them were burned except for that one. She didn't know.
Yeah, and let's remember, why do you think her father, the king, burned all of those spindles? Why do you think he burned all of them? Noah?
because he changed his mind to go at the white berry.
Yeah, but why would he burn all of them? For what reason do you think he would burn all of them? Ezekiel?
I can because the little baby would die.
Because he doesn't want her to die. The princess stretched forth when the lady said she was spinning. The princess stretched forth with her hand and asked, "What is this thing that spins so merrily?" But hardly had she spoken when she pricked her finger on the spinning wheel's spindle. And in that very moment, she fell into a deep, deep
Sleep.
sleep. Why has she fallen asleep? Why has she fallen asleep here? Why has she fallen asleep? Caden George?
Because that fairy said she's gonna go in deep, deep, deep sleep for 100 years.
That's right. That 12th fairy softened it. So instead of dying, she's going to sleep for 100 years. Eyes on me. Massage those brains. Keep them working. Keep them working. Bring it back in. At the same time, sleep fell upon everyone in the palace. Remember the milkmaids from the fables and stories?
Yes.
Even she fell asleep. The king and the queen, who had just come home, were in the great hall, fell asleep too. The horses in the stalls, the dogs in the yard, the pigeons on the roof, and even the flies on the wall.
Why? That's it.
Everyone had fallen asleep. Even the fire on the hearth went out. The wind stopped, and not a leaf from the trees. A hearth is the bottom of a fireplace where the wood is out. In a time, a hedge of thorns began to grow around the castle, which grew thicker and thicker and higher every year, until at last nothing could be seen of the castle, not even the flags on the highest towers. As the years passed, stories spread through the land of a beautiful princess sleeping behind a wall of thorns. Many of the young princes came, but none of them could break the thorns. But at long last, many years had passed. There came into a country a king's son who had heard an old man tell that there was a castle standing behind the hedge of thorns, and there was a beautiful, enchanted princess laying asleep. That word enchanted, that means under a magic spell. So we're going to keep that word up here, enchanted, under a magic spell, and put it for our vocabulary wall. So remember that word, enchanted. A magic spell. I shall make my way through and see the lovely princess. The old man warned him that many had tried but failed, but the prince would not listen. Now the 100 years were at an end, and the day had come for the sleeping princess to be awakened. When the prince drew near the hedge of thorns, it changed into a hedge of beautiful flowers, which bent aside to let him pass. When he reached the castle's yard, he saw the horses and dogs lying asleep, and on the roof the pigeons were sitting with their heads under their wings. As he entered the castle and climbed the steps, the prince saw everyone still asleep. The king, the queen, the cook, the maids, everyone. All was so quiet that he could hear his own breath. At last, the prince went up the narrow, winding stair and came to a room where the princess was sleeping. When he saw her looking so lovely in her sleep, he could not turn his eyes away. He bent down and kissed her. And she opened her eyes and smiled at him. Show me your biggest smile after 100 years of sleep. Together they went down the stairs and they saw the king and the queen waking up. All of the people in the castle were waking up and looking at each other in great surprise. The horses in the yard stood up and shook themselves. The dogs sprang up and wagged their tails. The pigeons on the roof flew into the fields. The flies on the wall buzzed and crept a little farther. Even the kitchen fire leapt up in a blaze. At last, the wedding of the prince and princess was held with great feasting and rejoicing. And they lived
happily ever after.
Yes, they rejoiced and lived happily ever after. Show me rejoicing. Happily ever after. Rejoicing, that means with excitement. Hold your bubbles.